Now, South Africa has seen an abundance of rain in the past 2 weeks, and although rain is usually welcomed by the agricultural sector, crops are dying due to the floods. I'm joined now by Wandile Sihlobo. He's Chief Economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa. Mr. Sihlobo, thank you so much for your time today. Give us an idea of how farmers in general are being affected by the rains right now.
I think, Thami, the outlook is somewhat mixed, but on aggregate, the recent rains, in fact, even since the onset of the season in October 2020, has been generally positive. So far, over the past few weeks, I would say that's where the rain has really been intense. And obviously, there are certain pockets of waterloggings that we do see, particularly in areas like Belfontein, Wesselsbron in the Free State province. But on aggregate, if one looks across South Africa, I would say we are now at a much more better shape. And in fact, if then in the next coming days or weeks, we could get a bit of sunshine, I think that we could continue to look forward to a fairly good season.
Now, there are farmers who are expecting some bumper crops at this time, perhaps their time of harvesting. How have they been affected by the rains?
We're still maintaining a relatively positive view, for example, across all of the major crops. We had feared at the start of the heavy rains that in areas such as Limpopo, as well as KZN, there could be some losses in the citrus plantings with small fruits still on the trees there. But it seems that with the preliminary assessment that the impact has been pretty much minimal. Now, if you move into central South Africa, where we are now at the mid-season of the summer crops, which will be harvested later on in the year. In there, we still think that South Africa could have a second biggest maize crop. For example, on our side at AgBiz, we're currently estimating South Africa's maize crop of around about 16.6 million tons. Now that, to me, will be the second biggest crop in the history of the country, but also it will be a massive crop if you consider that our consumption is only just around about 11.4 million tons. So generally, we are positive on that. And I do think that the rains also benefited just on the felds for some of the guys that are in the livestock. But at this point, given that there's starting to be a waterlogging in the central regions of the country, we think that going forward, much more of a sunshine will be way beneficial than further rainfalls.
So if we don't indeed get the sunshine that you hope for, what will be the repercussions of further rains?
I think I'm holding on in a much more positive side, Thami, on that. The weather forecast that we are seeing, it suggests that to a certain extent, going on to later this week, and also leading on into next week, we could begin to see some bit of sunshine. To an extent that we think that overall, I mean, this all is good news for South Africa's food prices and food price inflation. We're still thinking that consumers overall will have a fairly good year, and we think that agricultural sector will continue to be on a positive path. Obviously, in an event that we would have had a devastating rainfall, that picture would have changed. But I think with the evidence that we are seeing and the forecast of the rainfall, we're largely more on the positive side.
And you're talking about this nationally, not just in some specific provinces?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a national side on an agricultural side, which is the point that I was making, that certain provinces do have some bit of damages. But if you look at South Africa's agricultural sector, on aggregate, the picture is positive. But obviously, if one were to go to particular regions like those specific areas in Central Free State, that's the ones that I was mentioning, that there has been a bit of waterlogging that is beginning to be there. But obviously, when we think about the food supplies now, when we think about food prices and the health of the sector, we consider it on a national basis. And I think we are healthy. The people that have been unfortunate to a certain extent are countries like Mozambique, because even the likes of Zimbabwe, who have been affected by the cyclones, the insight from the ground, it suggests that even Zimbabwe is in a fairly bad shape, is a very good shape. So generally, I think that the damage of the cyclone for a number of countries have been somewhat minimal.
The regions that have suffered damage and loss due to the floods, like the Free State that you've mentioned, is there any sort of financial relief or compensation programs that perhaps are in place for them to access during this time?
I mean, I think so far it is still early because people are doing a preliminary assessment. That's where then the waterlogging in some of the grain region was being reported. But the scale for people to know, to say, okay, this is how much hectares or so that is affected, I think it's still too early on that. But I think the assessment, looking and hearing what the farmers are saying, but also just reflecting on a historical basis, this is likely to be somewhat minimal. And as per what assistance is going on, I mean, I think that at a later stage, once the assessment is clear, those are the discussions that will perhaps be considered.
Mr. Sihlobo, thank you so much for your time, and we certainly hope that there is a bit of sunshine that comes your way, if anything, for our plants and our harvesting community. That's Mr. Wandile Sihlobo there. He's Chief Economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa.